Awesome. I think it's going. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, I think everyone by now knows Christine. So Christine is the founder and CEO of Thought for Food. And she's really has done some amazing work in the world of policy with big multinationals, and then also has done a lot of work abroad in places like Haiti and Kenya and things like that. So just has a really, really interesting background. And I'm really excited that she'll share some of her insights into open business models and alternative business models. Thought this was a great week to talk about this for a couple reasons. You all have hopefully watched the Udacity videos on revenue models by now. And I think you've seen it goes through fairly typical things, I think. It's a little bit more geared towards web-based and application-based ventures. So just wanted to expose you guys to some other creative ways to bring in revenue and give you some examples on companies that are doing that. So Christine, do you want to take it away? Give any more of an intro or anything?
Sure, that sounds great. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to join today. And I hope that you are, getting a lot out of the boot camp experience so far. I know Jared is a rock star, and we're here for you guys every step of the way with questions that you might have. And the reason I'm here today is kind of, it's a few reasons. One is I happen to be very, very super passionate about kind of new business models that can be transformative in the world. And I think open innovation models and open business models are something really exciting to explore in food now. So I'll get to that in a second. And the other reason is because actually one of our main sponsors for Thought for Food is Syngenta. And this is kind of interesting, but their global head of intellectual property also happens to be a big champion of open innovation. And so he is going to be offering a $5,000 extra prize at the TFF Summit for the team that experiments and leverages an open business model in their project. So that's another prize that's going to be up for grabs at the TFF Summit. It's up to you whether or not you want to go for it. This is something that would be in addition to the winner or runner-up prize if you want to build this into your business model.
Yep, and we'll be sending out information about all of these prizes hopefully this week or a little bit later next week.
Exactly. Because we have, rightly so, a number of prizes up for grabs. So, of course, the TFF Challenge, Grand Prize and Runner-Up, Kirshner Prize, this Open Business Model Prize or Open Innovation Prize. And so the purpose of this call today is really to just kind of like introduce, what this is all about, why we're doing this, and then answer some questions that you might have. And like I said, we're available anytime, not just today, to talk this through. So Thought for Food, as you know, is the world's foremost organization for next generation innovation and collaboration in food security. And part of next generation innovation to us is really bringing a new set of values to how business is set up and run in food and agriculture. So we want to experiment a little bit with new kind of disruptive business models that take us away from this premise of like the typical VC question. What's your IP situation? What's my ROI going to be based on that? To a place where we're collaborating more, where we're integrating solutions more, where we're thinking of ways that we can actually like build, these kind of solutions that are bigger than we ever thought by radical collaboration. And so Thought for Food is a place to experiment with this by the nature of being a next generation organization, not a typical VC. So we know it's a little different. And, if you want to go down that typical VC route, obviously this might not be for you. And we don't want to like say you have to do one or the other. It's really up to you, but it is just something we want to try out and try to shape a new kind of conversation around business models. And we believe in business models, by the way. Because, of course, in order to be sustainable in the world, it's not just a charity kind of case that can go forward. I mean, it can be, but we think that, bringing entrepreneurial solutions is something that does lead to more sustainability in the market. But we want to explore things. So what exactly is an open business model? I mean, I think it's to be defined, but what we've seen from other sectors is that, open businesses generate value for others, not just for themselves. And that value can take many forms: knowledge, culture, relationship, livelihood, well-being. And it doesn't mean that open businesses are blind to money. Of course, they care about that. But really what drives them and what motivates them are the values they operate by. And that the value that they seek to create is more diverse than just monetary value for themselves. And this is, coming from one of the leaders of the Creative Commons, which is, I think, the world's foremost kind of open business model that's out there. The Creative Commons currently applies more to the creative industries, to people who are writing and publishing and creating, works of art or logos and things like this. But what a Creative Commons license does is it provides you a public copyright license. It allows free distribution, meaning that anyone can share or use the work at no cost, and then people can build on that work. What is required is attribution. And then there's other variations of that license that exist that have more requirements or not, such as rules for commercial use. And I'm sure you guys have come across Creative Commons license, in your university experiences. So some big examples of, companies you may know that use Creative Commons are things like Cards Against Humanity, the card game that, is pretty funny, especially over a few drinks. Do you guys know that game, Cards Against Humanity? Okay, maybe I'll bring my copy to the summit. But what it has allowed, actually, it's a game that you play to build, kind of funny headlines. And but what it's allowed is kind of mass innovation in the game. So the founders are comedians, and they created kind of a core set of cards that anyone can use and then build upon. And I think an important part to understand of the Creative Commons is that there's grant back provisions. So, it doesn't have to be, but you can, open innovation model or an open business model doesn't necessarily mean no intellectual property. You have intellectual property, but you use intellectual property actually as a tool to help people gain access and as a governance mechanism for your innovation or your creative good. And so even open source code in the computer world, there's copyright that still governs that. It gives you some control because you don't want people just stealing it and pirating it. It just gives you some control, like a gateway into this. But it's not used. It means that intellectual property is not used primarily as a tool to exclude. It's used as a tool to include. So I think that's just an important message to remember. There's so many examples. I can send this to you, from all kinds of different industries that are trying out open business models. I mentioned actually the software industry, and I mentioned the open source movement there, which I think is where a lot of the thinking here has been catalyzed from. And I don't know if you've heard of Linux, the operating system. Yeah. So this was a completely open source approach. And the founder, put out his code, people built upon it, they put it back into the system, and it became almost this like club of people who were playing around with software code and developing this platform. And that platform, because it existed and was freely available, has been used now, for Amazon Kindle. It's been used for all kinds of, different well-known, technology platforms. And the reason is, why, if you're an innovator, why would you start from scratch? You have something you can work from. Is it perfect? No. Is it something that, you can take and build upon? Absolutely. And so it's just been a phenomenal kind of, mechanism to empower more people with innovation and help innovation proliferate. Into all kinds of different spaces. And Jared and I were actually talking a few minutes ago also about, Apple is not known for being kind of an open business model, but they kind of quasi are. They built their platform and they have their API, and then anyone can build an app for it, using, of course, that API, but their platform approach is open. They're not the ones centralizing development of all of their apps. you want to develop an app, you can, and Apple will help make that available on their phones. So these are some like tech examples. I wanted to give another example. So as Jared mentioned, I've spent my time working on open innovation paradigms in a multinational company, Syngenta. And we have also tried to experiment with some of this stuff with regards to open licensing. And so what this means is we had developed a number of patented traits that were genetic traits that were used in vegetables in our company. And these traits were, many parties were interested in using them. And typically, in order to get access to these traits, we would send in a licensing manager and a lawyer, and bilateral negotiations would go on for something like 5 years. And it was, a costly endeavor actually on both sides. It was from our side, a paid lawyer. And from their side, often it was a small breeding company that didn't have lawyers. And so they were spending a lot of time, kind of in these negotiations. And finally, a royalty agreement was reached and a license happened, and, access to the trait was granted. But like I said, costly in terms of time and finances. And so what we did was we decided to set up, I guess the most colloquial way to describe it is an iTunes for plant breeding. And so this is a one-stop shop where we actually took all of our patented traits, put them onto a website with pre-negotiated license terms. And you could just go as a plant breeder and click with one click, I want this trait. Boom, you got the license, boom, you start breeding. If you felt like, and I should say the licenses, if you wanted to use these traits for humanitarian purposes or for, a nonprofit, it was free. And then depending on the size and revenue of your company, you got a different royalty. The actual amount of the royalty we guaranteed would be lower than a bilateral negotiation. So why as Syngenta would we do this? Well, I think part of the reason was we wanted to increase the number of transactions. Maybe it's a lower royalty per transaction, but we would get more transactions. That was the vision. There was also a whole kind of brand and reputation aspect to this. I mean, it's just in this world where the challenges facing agriculture are so big and so complex, I think just trying to fight for like patent and IP instead of like helping, breeding companies get traits that they need to meet farmer and societal demands just seemed like a losing battle. So we said, let's get on the forefront of this and let's start to tell a positive story and get people excited about this. And then came even bigger business benefits that were unintended. We ended up getting a germplasm, like reciprocal trade with a big company, purely because we had set this up. It had built so much trust and goodwill in the industry that this company, who typically was a big competitor of ours, decided to do this germplasm exchange with us. And so that was a huge result. And germplasm is the stuff that you put the traits into, by the way, in a plant. So it's really important when you're developing a crop for agriculture that you have both the germplasm and the trait. And these are not genetically modified traits, by the way. They were just native traits, they're called. So that happened. And so there's all these like unforeseen possible positive externalities that can happen by taking a more open and collaborative approach and being brave enough to do that. And I think that's an important point, is it's about kind of being brave too and saying like, I'm not sure, like, maybe I don't have everything figured out of how I'm going to make money, but have the confidence and, think through like, what's the story you want to tell? What are some alternative exciting ways that you can think about besides just protecting IP? And how can you foster more collaboration? And so the other thing that we've made available on this platform that I mentioned is know-how. So not only just the trait, but also like know-how and expertise and germplasm. So this platform has really been exciting for the plant breeding industry, and it's transformed a lot of the ways of thinking in our company about opportunities that exist. So I know I'm bombarding you with information, but I just wanted to throw out a few examples. I think we need more examples of open business models in food and agriculture. And so this is precisely why we think TFF is a great place to learn from you and, see if there's interest in exploring and experimenting with these things. And like I said, we'll help provide that safety net of some, potential cash coming your way to give you the confidence to do this. You can also try out, in the early stages that you guys are, you can try out several different, business models and revenue streams and as you enter into the market. So just think through that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was, how does this fit together with open data and open innovation? And I think those are all things that are part of open business, but they are distinct. So open data is an enabler potentially of innovation or open business models. And certainly we would encourage you also to think about open data, not only for yourselves, but other open data sets you can tap into and exchange with. And how you can build that into your story as a company and into your, brand. And then open innovation, I think, is really around the power of the crowd and how, you can innovate by bringing in more minds into, what you're doing. So you're not trying to internalize all of your research and development, for example. Where can you, go to other places? It's even stuff developing your logo, right? Is you could do it yourself, or you could go to some of these crowdsourcing platforms and get some external help. So it's just about, and that can decrease your costs of setting up your business by finding these ways to save money. And I think it's really, those kind of things are probably very obvious to you, being that you're next generation innovators. But to many people, it's not obvious to think through openness and collaboration in their businesses. They think they have to do everything for themselves. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Yeah. I think the last point you just made, Christine, is really interesting, that think about how you guys can build out some of these principles in your own ventures, but also be aware of what else exists out there. So Christine just mentioned the logo design. So I think there's things, it's called Fiverr. There's a lot of freelance work on Odesk where you can hire people to do data crunching, presentation making, whatever you need for relatively cheap. So again, that's utilizing these open innovation platforms, and I'd encourage you to check some of them out. I think I also just wanted to mention another example or two from actually past TFF teams. So one of our finalist teams last year was a company called Peer-to-Peer Probiotics. And they actually initially started out as a research project where they realized that fermentation was one of the only cooking techniques used around the world. And one of the really cool things with fermentation is one household can take a starter batch and share it with another household, and organically it can spread throughout a community. That was what their research was in, and they were increasing the nutritional content of food. By going through and developing their business model, they realized that would be really hard to monetize and really hard to get to the scale that they wanted to bring it to. So they actually they're beginning to start licensing out their technique to big companies, but leaving in that core aspect of people are still allowed to transfer this, and they're going to be encouraged to transfer their starter batch throughout these communities. So it's also just thinking through, I think that's a really interesting distribution model. Leveraging these big partners to get their product out there, and then having a trickle down. I don't want to say trickle down, but
but it's it's an alter. So they get kind of the big rich companies to kind of subsidize then the peer-to-peer model to distribute right to the people who need it, who might not have income. Exactly.
And then just another really interesting one, the AgriSpheres team isn't on, but they were part of something called IGEM, which is International Genetically Engineered Machines. So are any of you familiar with GitHub, which is an online repository for code? So essentially IGEM is creating an online repository for synthetic biology building blocks.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're saying that people that are going to be working on and changing our DNA and or I should say like plants, animals, bacteria, DNA, that should be open sourced, and we should just build on what other people's learnings are. So I think that's a really tangible example of a community coming together to share knowledge, so that new and unique products and ideas, something like agrospheres, can come out and exist in the world.
And exactly, those are great examples. And I think like this kind of like, how do you enable like more innovation based on what you're doing? So, you know, you have weather sensors, like do you need to develop those from scratch? Are there blueprints that are available, or do you want to make your blueprints available? You know, I think when it comes to new foods, like maybe it's about getting people to help develop recipes or sharing your data and information. I think there's a lot of ways that these projects can play around with this, and we just want to like encourage you to do so. Yeah.
Well, cool. So that was a lot of info, but do you guys have any immediate reactions or questions or things that you're thinking about after hearing all of this?
Don't forget to unmute. Well, can I ask you a question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to call out James, because this is something we've been chatting about a little bit, where asking, so what is the actual value that you're providing to people? And how does that different based on if they're at the farmer level or maybe big, like higher corporate level? So yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm trying to think about is how can you, what we want to promote is development and innovation at the farmer level, who are the people who might not necessarily be able to pay for or afford the entirety of our tools. But how do you get in enough revenue alternatively that can promote that innovation, but without, I guess, us being taken advantage of or just entirely missing the revenue that means that we can't actually grow as a company? And how do you sort of balance those two things between revenue and innovation and development?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's a great question. And so this is where we can match you with, if you're interested in exploring this with some experts in the field. But I mean, you're probably, I don't know, because we haven't spoken that much, but maybe you're thinking of value capture from like the farmer buying your device, right? And so in an open business model, maybe the value capture happens further downstream when the farmer is making more money, right? And so maybe the conversations you're having for purchasing these devices, they're open and available, and like farmers can maybe build on them or whatever, I don't know. But like maybe the value capture comes from the person, who's buying the farmer's goods at the market. Because they're actually, getting higher quality, more, I don't know. So
So I was going to say, one of the things that we're toying about with now that I've spoken to Jared about is distributing. So we've got hardware, which is the weather stations that we're developing, and then obviously the valuable thing is the data and the service that you're providing out of that. And what we're trying to explore is how you can provide the hardware for free so that it becomes accessible to the farmers. So they get access to the data, but get revenue, as you say, from the data that's being generated from people who are also adding value from the farmers. So they are people like the cooperatives or traders or roasters or people like that who already are adding value, and whether we can make our model sustainable through that. It's hard though, because it's obviously you have to front a lot of the cost, and it's having the trust that you're going to be able to recoup that money. And is it that you can trust that I don't know, having a subscription that means that you get your money back over 2 years, is that something that you want to do? Because it's a big risk, and trying to work those things out.
Yeah, completely. Well, yeah, let me think about that a little bit. I was also thinking of, and I don't know if this is, again, like partnerships. So also part of open business models are like unexpected partnerships or open and collaborative partners. So I actually met with a company in Portugal that is, in addition to, they're not focused on, you know, kind of like developing country smallholders, but they were, so they were also had a platform for services to be provided. So like, you know, based on data generated from sensors, like they could bring like a drone flyer, like to the farm, or an irrigation specialist and this type of thing. So they were getting kind of revenue in different ways, like by renting out their sensors and the data they were selling, but also from these people who were providing services for farmers that, you know, would like farmers could then get through these partnerships that they were forming.
Okay, yeah, that's really
maybe something like that is interesting. Also, like I know, like from my experience working with agribusiness, there's a lot of issues with spraying pesticides, right, by smallholder farmers in developing countries. So maybe a service provider comes in and does that based on data you have, and then you take away like unsafe use of pesticides. And then Syngenta is really interested in paying you because their like stewardship efforts are increased, you know?
Okay.
You see what I mean? Like, it's like,
I think
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are huge amounts of possibilities that are opened up by having that model. It's just knowing about them, because they're not traditional. I think they're in many ways harder to come across, but when you do, they're possibly much more fruitful.
Yeah.
Well, totally. And I think it's like also like explore, if you're interested in this, you know, additional 5K prize, and, you know, it might just mean taking some of the hours of your day, which I know are dedicated to getting your business off the ground, but scour like other industries where you can like see if there's something like, you know, that you can transpose into your, or just like go have a conversation with somebody from, I don't know, the music industry who is using Creative Commons, and see like what maybe learnings they have. I don't know.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I can also, like I said, put you in touch with some experts here who might have some creative ideas for you.
Yeah. The pesticide idea is something that we hadn't come across, but has a lot of potential.
Well, what's the pain point of Syngenta or another multinational? They're worried about farmers misusing their products. So like, how can maybe a service provider come in and take that off for them? And then you're the one that connects the service provider at the right time for the farmer to increase his yields. I don't know. But
I'll make sure you guys get a connection. I'll set up an email connection for you guys right after this. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other ideas, questions? Christine, you had something that you were going to?
I just wanted to ask if you guys if it's exciting to you, like open business models.
So, if I say again, I think the interesting thing is, maybe it's orientated at us, but we're working with smallholder farmers, and one of the big problems is they're obviously very low income, and that's often one of the biggest barriers of getting real innovation and development in these areas, because often technology and things cost money to people developing it, and they want to recoup that money. And I think that's been a huge barrier to getting things that are successful and sustainable into the field. So these open models where you're sort of spreading the costs and doing things a bit more interestingly, for us, are really interesting in the fact that you can then deliver real benefits to the sort of lowest income people by not putting all of the costs on them, by actually spreading that. And I think that's something that's really interesting to us, and why we're so interested in exploring these different models.
Cool.
What about you guys?
Yeah, sorry.
I have another question back for you, James. Yeah, no, it's great. I have another question for you, but I want to hear from.
Hi.
Can you talk a little louder? It's hard to hear you.
Perfect. Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Perfect. No, it's pretty exciting for us as well. Like we were just discussing, as Christine was in fact sharing the views on open business models, and like we're definitely seeing like a couple of opportunities that we would like to explore as well. Like we were thinking, like since we're as mentioned, we're at an early stage, we can even offer the opportunity of like providing it as an open sourcing platform. So whereby a business model could be more about just collaborating these parties rather than actually like making transactions happen. So it could be a means of just like connecting parties and something like a Craigslist or
Yeah.
or classifieds, where we actually like have, that would like be a win-win situation where we would actually increase the number of transactions, increase the number of traffic in the site itself, and at the same time we help them to collaborate. So in a sense, one way we were thinking. The other thing we were also thinking of is like maybe we could have like joint partners that could actually like potentially benefit our projects that we're working with. So like for the farmers, for example, if we could find like some government partners or some pesticide companies that would actually be common across all these, and so it would actually be like economies of scale for the pesticide company as well, while at the same time the farmers get it at a good price as well.
Love that.
Would you consider that, like, do you think that could qualify somewhat like an open business model?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no like preset definition of what this has to be. So I think like the idea is to integrate solutions and to be more open and collaborative, which those definitely touch upon for sure. Yeah, I love that. I think you guys have like a perfect type of model, like you said, because it is, it's investing, and you can experiment a little bit with these partnerships. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that. I think that was really insightful. For sure.
Yeah. And then, well, I was also just thinking because, so part of open business models too is kind of the whole tinkering culture, right? And so like by tinkering, I mean like people typically in other engineering practices or science practices, they get, models and blueprints or code, and they, build it themselves. They change things actually as they build it, because they're also driven by experimentation. And there's a great actually TED podcast. I shared it with Jared, and we should share the link around here if you're interested in learning more. But like they were talking about these guys in California who wanted to explore a cave, and they built a deep, like a exploratory robot to do so. And then they like put out the blueprints for free. And they also did a Kickstarter campaign, which got like $900,000 or something crazy. But they, by putting out these blueprints, like people were able to, build these robots from, recouped trash or whatever. And then they also made the robots even better, more powerful, more effective, and even cheaper. So I think like that's also something to just consider, is that maybe like your cost of goods for whatever. So this is maybe going back to the weather sensors, or some of, maybe not you guys AgriYolo, but some of the ones that have, tangible products. It's like maybe your cost of goods can go down by adopting an open business model. Maybe you'll get like cheaper ways to innovate by getting people to help you do that. And then on your place, AgriYolo, I think like I would personally, as an investor, a young investor, be interested in, an experimental farm where these types of approaches were like core to the business. So yeah, it could be part of your like narrative too.
Yeah. I'm trying to think through. So we have some teams that are more focused on like the food side. And I'm trying to think through of some examples. And Christine, do you have any examples that come top of mind when you think of like open sourcing in?
Yeah, to me, I think like the immediate reaction I have is around recipes and the science and the open data side of things, particularly for new foods. I mean, Soylent is a great example if you've been following this crazy guy in Silicon Valley who developed a drinkable meal that he basically like talked to 1 million nutritionists and said like, how can I concoct the perfect meal that I don't have to eat? Because he was a coder who didn't want to take a break from coding. So basically what he did was he open sourced the whole recipe, and people are obsessed with Soylent because they hack it. They get the base recipe from him, and then they like play around and tinker with it and hack it and add flavorings and add, protein powder or add insect, whatever. The world is your oyster. But I think like for people who are developing new foods, that's really interesting if you follow a Soylent example. And he's really built a movement around him of people who are just attracted to the open source approach that he's taken.
Yeah, And I think what you just said, he built a movement. I think that's something that's really interesting in the food space right now. It's something that people want to be part of a community, right? Like it's to your advantage if you can say like, buy into this because you're going to be part of this larger community, right? I think, and that's in a way.
It's like the hacker community. It's in everything. It's not just food. It's hackers. It's a community. Biohackers. I'm starting to talk with a lot of them right now, and it's completely it's as you said, people want to be part of this.
Yeah, and I think another example too that just comes to my mind are also like distribution chains. So what does it look like for people to creatively partner with distribution chains, and where's the line? And maybe it is just a partnership that you form, but I always come back to, I mean, this isn't necessarily a food example, but Coca-Cola is everywhere around the world. And they have, I guess it's been like almost 5 years now. They were actually starting to deliver medicine and vaccine through their distribution chain.
Totally.
And so what are some creative ways that maybe you can work with existing supply chains to either get the goods? So like for Waste Busters, you guys are collecting food waste. What are some creative ways you can gather those?
Yeah.
But then also, what are creative ways that you can distribute and get that back out to people?
That's great. That's a completely unconventional partnership, but it's absolutely right. It was pharma companies saying, people in these remote villages can't get vaccines, but they can get Coca-Cola. So let's get Coca-Cola, or Pepsi. I can't remember which one, but like, let's get them to deliver the vaccines. And that was a completely unconventional partnership. And we would love to see that kind of thing coming through the projects too, because it's really, it works. It gets noticed. Yeah.
Yep.
I also just wanted to mention one last thing so we talked about open source code, but there's also the whole open hardware movement. And actually, like at the TFF Summit, we're working with the open source IKEA product that is the vertical garden that they've put how to build it for free online. And we're actually having a bunch of builders come and build several of those that will be on display at the TFF Summit with our food and everything like this. So I think the open hardware kind of aspect of things, I know there's already, what is it called? Open Farm or something like this, where you can it gives you blueprints for like tractors and, saws and everything you need to be like a farmer. So yeah, there really is a whole community of people around this that believe in this.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas, guys? No? All right. Well, cool. So I'll have some follow-up calls I think with almost all of you, except Agriolo. I'll have some follow-up calls here in the next day or two. And yeah, I think Christine and myself are happy to continue exploring this. If you guys have questions, like you want to see some of these logo crowdsourced idea things, or just want more information, let us know and we'll provide that to you guys. Okay?
We can't wait to meet you in person.
Let the countdown begin.
It's so soon. It's so exciting. Great. Okay. We'll keep up the hard work. Thank you. And contact us anytime. We're here for you.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.